Hey Derby World, welcome to Derby Chat with All For Him Racing videos, where we sit down and chat with those making an impact in the sport of demolition derby. And today I am sitting down with the one and only Mark Elliott. Mark, you have a name in the derby world for a lot of different things. First and foremost, driver, builder, great competitor. Then you've really switched gears and gotten a little more out of the driver's seat and into the announcing, and then now with your point series, stepping up the game, raising the average, as you like to say. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be on our podcast today.
Thank you, Alex. And I just want to say kudos to you for, I know this is something you've been excited about and also really nervous. So,
extremely nervous, definitely outside of my comfort zone. I'm used to just being the guy behind the camera that just gets to capture it. And it's really weird.
So I actually had the first pleasure of hearing your voice on camera, just watching some of your YouTube videos. And I didn't know that you actually did some commentary and walking around the pits and stuff. So again, man, happy for you. And I honestly, I'm thankful and blessed that you even asked me to be a part of it. And I can't wait to see where you take this and how it just complements the successful company that you've already built.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. The goal here, guys, is we're going to just sit down with Mark and we're going to ask him some different questions, get to know him a little bit so that way you guys get to know where he started out from and, how you could be here yourself, sitting here across the table for me. And I guess we'll just start off with the first question. How did you first get exposed to Derby?
So I'll start with a disclaimer. I'm a terrible listener, and my comprehension skills are even worse. So if I get a little off track, you have to reel me in.
No problem.
So to answer your first question, Alex, just to be clear, how did I get exposed to Derby? I was fortunate. I think everybody's got a county fair story, at least most people that I've ever talked to. And I have no idea why my mom ever took me, or if it's something that, maybe that's something I should ask her one day. It couldn't have been that I asked her, because she took me to the Preble County Derby the first time when I was 2 years old.
Wow.
And I'm sure I've missed some over the years, but for the longest time it was the thing to say that I'd never missed one. I've been gone since I was 2. So whether, back then there was 3 to 4 a year.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just the fair. There was pre-derbies and late derbies, and I don't know, man. It just got me. At that age, it was a bag of Hot Wheels at Mammal's house. And for me, the older I get, I look back like I've done something 1,000 times, but maybe it was 3 times. But it feels like every time I was at my grandma's house, that bag of Hot Wheels was on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing the same things that, ironically, that I'm doing today. I was lining those cars up and doing the countdowns, and I never would have connected the dots, but that would be something that I would ever do as a passion. So all the way from being at the fair that day, the Preble County had a curtain up on the fence, so you couldn't see inside. You could hear that there were actually cars there.
Yeah.
There's actually a car there. There's a car there. You heard it unload. And I can remember laying on the ground, looking
just trying to
under
get a peek, right?
looking under
Right
that
through
fence.
that little hole.
Or even, we lived in a trailer park, and there was a guy across the street that I wish I could remember his name, but he had an old car, and we know today that car, some guy building it in the trailer park, was probably a piece of junk, man.
Mm-hmm.
He was probably the first car out, but just to me, that was going to be the winner. Because you looked at it every day. It's sitting in his driveway. He's down there hammering on it, painting on it. And,
Mm-hmm.
and just to add to that, briefly, my uncle Kenny, he derbied. So,
Okay. So you had a family tie there that was
he
going
did,
and rooting for.
But nothing like we see today. It was at Mammal's shed,
Mm-hmm.
outside of the shed. It was one car a year tops, maybe not even every year, but that's how I remember it. And I remember being so excited one time when he made the feature. I mean, that was it.
Mm-hmm.
That was like a big deal, and he was probably the first car out, but it was like, we've got one picture of me and a couple of my cousins and an uncle and one of his friends just all sitting on that car and just
That's cool.
I think we take for granted today because pictures are just so readily available that like that one picture, I look back on that and I can think about my whole childhood. So I do credit my mom for taking me that first Derby. I absolutely credit him for giving me a passion for just like what it would actually mean to have a car and drive it.
So what made you want to do it in the first place then? Because what was the point where you were like, okay, I'm crazy enough, I'm going to do this, or I just want to do that? That just looks like so much fun.
I remember in that same trailer park, I remember having a Knight Rider big wheel, and I remember having other kids come over with their big wheels, and I remember derbying there in our driveway at that trailer park. And I don't want this to come across wrong, but I remember back that far. I don't know how old I was. I don't know how old I was when we lived in that trailer. I know it was elementary, but I remember feeling like I just I couldn't play hard, or else they wouldn't play. Like I remember hurting one of my buddies, like his elbow or something, knocking him off his big wheel. And I just remember having the feeling like they couldn't I couldn't go all in. You know what I mean? Like, cause all in for me, it was just like, I loved it. Like whether I was playing with them Hot Wheels or on that big wheel, like it was just, it has always been something that there's very few things in life that you just feel like you have control over. It's all on you. You don't have to get picked for the team. When you're in that car, or in that case on that big wheel, like it is survival mode. Yep. It is like, there is something about it that just, and so I can remember all the way back that far to feeling like, and even like the smallest, the weirdest things of in that same town, sitting at the little country kitchen with those, you remember those plastic milk, tear the lid off and dump them.
Yep.
I can remember sitting there waiting on our food, you know, just not just smashing them together like some kid that can't control himself, like thinking about Derby all the time, but literally, whether it be that or a pop can, just watching how it bends when you hit it this way and maybe squeezing it in a little bit, like
and seeing how it changed.
It seems like from as early as I can remember, the whole thing has always fascinated me, whether it be the competition part or the structures of the cars and understanding the car and how it bends and how to make it last, if that makes sense, from as early as I can remember.
Wow. What was your first car? Do you remember that?
I do. Shout out to my stepbrother at the time, Jason Wisman. Him and my stepdad now, they had a garage, and he was one that I kind of followed around, and he did it, but I'd never done it or had the resources. Like I said, I had an uncle that did it a few times growing up. That was it. You know, there was no direct family involvement in the sport besides my mom just, you know, taking me and being a part of it. So I don't know if he gave it or we found it, or I don't remember the details, but it was about an 85 Caprice. So it was a square body GM.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was just stoked. I mean, at that time it was all motor swap. So he somehow had a 400 small block. It had headers on it, but they were single pipes. I remember that. And they were bent in, like it looked like they were formed around the like it was like it had some damage to it already. But long story, not so long. I'll never forget, just I don't remember the up to, the feelings, the nervous. I think everybody probably still gets that, but I'll never forget when it actually started. I remember being so excited inside that helmet that like I was literally out there screaming and like just talking. I could not believe like everything that I had thought growing up and playing with those Hot Wheels and whatever all the dreams and the mentality that I had around that to actually be on that track and experience it. Like it's until you've done it, I wouldn't pay it justice to explain it. But then there was a gap after that. That was when I was like 16, 17 maybe. And there was a gap until the early 2000s, 2001, until I actually like got some equipment, bought a rear end. We built an engine, nothing special. Bought an 85 Crown Vic that me and my friends, I bought it off his mom. And so we'd like partied in this thing and like just destroyed this car as 16, 17-year-old kids, just driving it into who knows what and who knows where. But like, I still have that key to that car.
That's awesome.
With a trophy. That was it. That was the first time fun. There was an opportunity that I took advantage of. But I wasn't hooked until that second time when I really made the life investment and bought some stuff. And I would consider that the start.
And never looked back after that.
That doesn't even honestly, Alex, I can't even explain it, and I'm sure I'm not alone, but that was it. At that point, it was laser focused from there on out until I think I woke up 10, 15 years. I mean, it was just, that's every day, all day, work, get off work, start building cars.
About how many cars when you were kind of really getting into it, about how many cars a year did you build? Was it still just one and you just ran it multiple times, or did you? I definitely got the miles out of the car. I was so into it, I just didn't keep a track of stuff like that. I mean, I could guess from the hip, 4, 5, 6 cars, but that could easily be 5 derbies, or it could be 50. I definitely, if you ever talk to anybody from where we're from, or maybe who was part of that journey, on more than one occasion, people were giving me a hard time about taking a car back, whether it be from safety or wasting my time, or it's a piece of junk. There's going to be all fresh cars there. And for me, I loved it so much. Like this is kind of nerdy and kind of weird, but man, I would all the way back to bending those cans or containers or whatever, milk cartons, whatever, and really understanding or believing that I understand how a car bends and like how much life's left in it. Man, I took some probably unsafe at best cars and had some real good success out of them. So like, I just attribute that to that mentality of understanding what you're in, and you could insert that into your career, into anything you do in life. Know where you're at, know the game, know the audience, and put yourself out there, right? And I think it's the competitive spirit too, right? I mean, you're wanting to top your performance the last time you were out there, but then also when guys are talking, crap to you, you want to bring it on.
As absolutely, the more in life I learn about ego, that definitely drove a lot of it. Like, it was almost like when somebody would say, I wouldn't take that car, or you're crazy, why would you do that? That was almost like fuel. Like, one, it felt kind of, I know those weren't insults, but like, I wouldn't have been doing it if it didn't make sense in my head. And then to have people challenge it or question it or even poke at it, then it's like, watch this. And that didn't mean that it always worked out, but like, more times than I can remember, it did work out. And those same people are like, you're crazy. Like, you're nuts, man. Like, okay. Yeah. Tell me something that I haven't figured out yet.
That's cool. So Mark, what would you give for advice to somebody who's looking to get started in the sport today? Because obviously when you were starting, it was probably a little bit different. I would assume it's probably more stock builds. Certainly didn't have social media where everybody was sharing all their builds, all their tricks and things. What would you give for somebody looking to get started in the sport today? I
encourage people to take advantage of the resources. So I think to your point, for me or anybody that started derbying, 20 years ago, the resources were a lot thinner, because people didn't share ideas, and you really had to either learn the hard way, learn yourself, or you had to get in with the right people. And I was so blessed and so fortunate with the era, I would call it, of derby drivers of when I started. And, they were kind of still derbying, and then they kind of grew out of it. But like, I attribute to so much of my success to getting to watch just the 50-mile radius of where I was at. So I think a lot of people probably have a similar story. So if the resources today are readily available at a Smith Metalworks Expo, or the videos that you shared for people that didn't go, or there's not too many people in today's sport that if you ask them, they won't just tell you. Now, on the flip side of that, in today's world, it's so much easier for us to use electronic device and text you and ask you where your hotel is, or versus it seems like back then that stuff wasn't a thing. So like you had to have the gonads to walk up to somebody at their car and talk to them, and sometimes you got shooed right back off. But I know if the derby today, the derby we're going to today, if there's 100 cars there, if there's 100 drivers, I would venture to say 80% of them would tell you anything that you ask them, or anything that you want to know. So if you are not blessed, like some of the people, man, some of my friends, like I always tell them, I can't imagine growing up like you did, and their dads, grandpas, just being deeply invested in the sport, and almost not even having a choice but to follow those footsteps. For some of them, maybe that wasn't a good thing for them, but they just had resources for days, all the way to somebody like me who at that time, like I had a mom that was taking me to watch the derby. Right. And so like if a person like me wanted to get into the sport and they just didn't have a direct family resource, I would encourage them to jump right on Facebook, right on somebody's website, right at the derby, the tracks, anybody, and just start asking questions. Be curious. That's I could have said everything that I just said in 2 words. Be curious, because if you want to make the investment, it doesn't take a lot to get into the sport, because there's a class for everybody. And then if you like that and you want to move up, then, try to win a little bit, make a little bit, and reinvest it. So I think it could be way easier for somebody to get in the sport today than it was when I started, for sure.
Yeah. And now you're seeing things like even like the littles are getting to go and do power wheels. So kind of like with you with the big wheels just crashing into each other. Now it's power wheels are happening. And then you've got Smith Metalworks help sponsor more youth events. You're seeing youth all over the place. And that was something just a few years ago that I didn't even realize that was a thing.
I can't even imagine. And I can't imagine putting my 12-year-old daughter in a car. Like, kudos to all those people putting their kids in youth cars. I had a guy, we've got a show in Proctorville, Ohio, and he asked if his 7-year-old could run youth. And I'm like, nah, man, that's too young. And he's like, bah, he's ran Power Wheels all his life. Like, I'm sorry, man, we can't.
That's pretty young.
You take somebody like Rick Clark's son, the Power Wheel Derby at the Turkey Derby 2 years ago. Actually, let me back up. I don't think it was it doesn't matter what derby. I believe it was Portland, Indiana. And that's funny how they all just start to blend together. Anyways, there was adults out there, and he rolled one of them. So, like, is this dude he is derby. And, somebody that young probably could get away with jumping in a youth car. And and doing really well. It just, yeah, to your point, I can't imagine being a kid in today's Derby and getting to, I would have definitely loved to have done the Power Wheels and definitely like to I've heard this like 3 times this week, but like when I was 15, there wasn't, you went with the adults, like,
Yep.
and they didn't care. Like back then, if a woman or a kid ran with the adults, like they were the first to go. Like just get them out of the way.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely the sport is definitely evolving in the right direction for the longevity and future of it. That's for sure.
Yeah. When I got started, you had to be 18. They wouldn't even accept like a notarized anything if you were under 18. So the moment I could do it, I did it. But man, I was chomping at the bit years before that. But I'm sure my parents are probably glad I waited.
Yeah.
So obviously we've talked a little bit about how you got into the driver's seat, but at what point did you decide that, hey, announcing looks interesting? Because I don't know if maybe not everybody watching or listening to this or watching at home know everything that you were doing now, but you've kind of switched gears and gone into announcing a fair bit.
I don't know if I've said that yet, so I'm still trying to figure out how it happened. I did slow down derbying. The timing was right. We could talk about family, we talk about work. It was time for me to slow down. My wife begged me to keep everything and just do one a year. I don't have that in me. I don't have that in me. I'm completely ate up with it. If I built one car, I'd figure out how to run it 20 times if that's the only car I was going to get to build that year. So like, no matter how many cars I would have built, if I would not have gotten rid of my stuff, like I would have figured out a way to, once that switch is flipped, man, there's no shutting it off. But there was a guy named Todd Hollinger. He's an Ohio guy. We could accredit him to the contoured rollover bars on the Crown Vics. That's the first person I remember that started selling those. But Todd he's derbied. He derbied Den. He's did a little promoting, but he needed somebody to announce a show for him. And one of my good friends, Toby Hiley, was already working for him as an inspector. And I don't know the story on their end. I don't know if Toby planted the seed. I don't know. At that time in my life, I had been doing some public speaking at work, and some of that stuff was getting shared around on Facebook. That didn't mean I was good at it. That didn't mean I was comfortable doing it.
He's willing to talk into a microphone.
Yeah, right.
Give him one.
Didn't mean that was my passion by any means. So if I'm writing a story without knowing, because I've just never asked, like, I'm thinking that maybe he saw that, okay, this guy's probably not afraid to at least talk. Toby's friend. I knew Todd, so we were already friends, and he asked, and about like you asking me to come here, the first reaction emotionally is fear, and then I've learned to try to lean into that stuff, and it doesn't mean I do it every time by any means. It would have been a lot easier to make up an excuse of why maybe we just wait and do this next time, but that's kind of how that worked. I was just leaned into it, and why not? And I don't feel like I had any more clue that day of what I was doing than I do today, because I still feel like that little kid with the Hot Wheels, if that makes any kind of sense. I'm a process guy, so I try to at least start the shows the same, like, and that's not like from a military background. That's from otherwise I'm going to forget something. So I just try to create a process, and it's like I go back to that place when it comes down to two cars, because that's what I love. I love derbying. I love derbying people. I love seeing what somebody's made of. Yeah. And it doesn't always work to your advantage, but I just love seeing, like, just testing people. And so when I get to witness that, from the announcing seat and I'm watching, like, I'm thinking of the possibilities. I'm thinking what both drivers are thinking. I'm thinking of who has the advantage based on what they've got left in their car. And I'm thinking about what the car that has the disadvantage, what his opportunities are. Take yourself back to Vegas when I jumped in there and did that track shot. The night that Pete Hansen and his team won that team show. If you watch that broadcast, you can hear me, and that's exactly what I'm doing, analyzing, like, okay, so Pete or whoever, doesn't matter, is outnumbered right now. So there's only a few opportunities somebody has in that position, and more times than none, you see people miss that boat. And so that's why I got so jacked up. It wouldn't have mattered if it was Larry that I didn't know. That's why I get so jacked up when somebody throws that long. I reference football a lot. It's not like I'm this great football fan, but I talk about throwing that Hail Mary because sometimes it seems like that's somebody's only chance to see that checkered flag. And in that specific case, like, I watched him do exactly what I believed. Doesn't mean I'm right. I watched him do exactly what I believed in my mind, what I was excited and passionate about to get him where he was trying to get. And it's almost like sometimes when you're watching, like, so that just lets you know that you're not alone in your thoughts, because when you're watching and you're thinking, okay, if this person does this, this could happen, and then they actually do it, you didn't have anything to do with it, unless we're talking vibes and higher power and faith. But like, you're sending that energy out into the world, like, man, this dude's got 3 flat tires, like, he can barely steer, like, if he's able to do this to this car, that's his shot. Like, I've been there where the car is so much better than my car, and my only shot is if what feels like luck, and it happens. So I know it's possible, and I think 1,000% that's why I get so fired up.
Well, and I think that's something you bring as an announcer, that you go to your standard county fair shows or just some of these other shows. The announcer, he announces a couple derbies a year, and that's about it. He doesn't understand the ins and outs. You've spent so much time in the driver's seat that you actually help educate the crowd what's happening, or why a certain hit maybe was more legal than it should have been. Because some people called driver's doors, but you know darn well he was shielding. He did that on purpose. I think that's something that you bring, which I know you've commented on also can go the opposite way of you're educating the crowd, but if the guy's in the driver's seat and he's trying to restart, you're educating the drivers, and you got to be careful with that because it's so easy.
Yes, 100%. That's a continued battle for me, because like, I don't want to, I got to be biased in that situation. No matter who wins, like, somebody's going to win, and it's so hard not to. Well, so that 100% that could go a couple opposite ways, because I could be telling them what I think. I could be completely wrong. I don't know everything. I am a student of the game. I'm there watching and learning every time, and the next time I get in a car, I'll probably implement new things that I learned since the last time I ran. So, if they're on the track and they listen to me and then it doesn't work out for them, that's a whole nother animal. I preach to people. There's nobody in that crowd. When I see people looking over to their friends or fans and asking them what to do or how's the car look, there's nobody. I don't care how close to that track they are. Nobody knows what's going on inside that cockpit better than you do, and you got to trust in that. And it doesn't mean you're always going to be right, but the very few times in my life where I have listened to somebody on the sidelines, it may not have meant that they gave me bad advice, but I started this podcast with saying I'm a bad listener and my comprehension skills are even worse. They could have been telling me to go left and I understood right. And,
or they don't use the nose. And you were like, okay, use the nose. Okay,
right.
Got it.
So I cannot, if I'm a little off track here, but I cannot stress that enough, that there will never be anybody that knows better than what inside that car. Even if you can't see the outside, even if you can't see the bumper hanging off of it, that the fenders aren't into the tires, so you can't hear them. You got to listen. You got to know your car. I said that in the beginning, and we're right back to that. You got to know what you got, and you got to listen and feel it. And that's why I talk about stripping cars out, and people complain about that, and they pay people. That for me, that's the start of our relationship. Like, I really feel like I'm one with that car, and so I won't get too far off track, but definitely encourage people to know exactly what they got.
So I think it'd be safe to say that you've really in the sport become one of the premier announcers, Mark. Now, to give you a lot, I know you take a step back and say you're still a student of the game, but let's be honest, you've worked your butt off to get where you are, and you've gotten opportunities to announce shows that I think the guy who went back to that first show that you announced, you probably never thought you'd get to. Would that be a fair statement?
One, thank you, man. That means a lot, because for me, it's never been about being the best or better than anybody else. For me, no matter if it's announcing or Monday when I go to Rexark or today at the show, like, there's a little bit of ego in this, but I always want to try to give more than anybody could possibly ever give me. And I think I still have a lot to learn about that in life, of why I kind of tick that way. But I think specifically for announcing, I think that's what makes, it's a job, it's a service. I get paid to go to the show, and there's an expectation that if somebody's standing on the fence, that I'm going to tell them to sit down. There's an expectation that I announce the names if they're even wrote on a piece of paper when the drivers pull on the track. There's an expectation that there's a countdown. There's an expectation when there's a red flag, I tell them there's a red flag. And so I could write this short story about, okay, this is what I have to do today. And I go there and I do those things right, and I clock out and everybody's happy. But that doesn't do it for me. For me, it's being flat out scared to death to even turn that microphone on. And I'm having all this self-doubt, and why am I even doing this? Like, I don't even think I want to do it next year. Like, there's all these things going through my mind. And the first thing I say, whatever that is, like, it's on from there. And all the way fast forward to the end of those heats that I talk about, where I just get so jacked up, and just making the people there feel like, wow, like, this is great. Like, because Derby drivers work their tail off, and those fans have no idea what those guys went through to get that car, whether it be financially or physically. And I always had a chip on my shoulder for that. I sandbag all day long, and anybody that said that that's not good for the fans, I tell them, those fans don't have an ounce of effort in my car. I could care less what they think. And it took announcing for me to have a new perspective on that, because without the fans, guess what? The promoter's not going to have the money to pay those drivers. And if the promoter doesn't have money to pay those drivers, then the drivers are going to go somewhere else. So the first shirt we ever made, my daughter made up the saying on the back, but it was, her big thing at that time was satisfying. And so we said, satisfying fans one show at a time. And really, I believe that is what drives me, is people feeling like they're glad that they bought that ticket.
Yeah, and you gotta have the energy, right? Because if you go to a show where the announcer's just deadpan, just doing the bare minimum, cashing that check, as you kind of pointed out, the crowd feeds off that, and they leave just not feeling satisfied in the event. It could have been the best heats out there that you've seen all year, but if there's no energy, nobody leaves happy. Yeah,
and that's a great point. And that's not easy when I don't have that energy to give. I can remember sometimes last year where it was just like, how are we even going to do this today? So that's when you pray.
Yep. Well, yeah, and I could see it towards the end of the year. Because I was feeling it too, especially last year. I mean, having to really rise to the occasion to have a successful 2020. And I could tell that you were looking a little beat down, but nobody could tell on the mic. And I think that's a kudos to what you've been able to do. And, you rise to the occasion better than anybody in that spot.
Well, thank you, man. That means a lot, because I sure felt it. At times it didn't feel like that. And I always try to, no different than if I'm driving the Derby car, anything that I'm doing in life, I just try to learn from it and learn, like, okay, if on show 19, if I really just about didn't think it was possible to even do it because I was so wore out, like, was it wore out physically or was it wore out mentally? So, I mean, trying to up my game on the physical aspect of it, trying to eat a little better, got me a good exercise in before I came here, because it's not like a NASCAR driver. They've got to be in shape to get out there and drive those cars like that. And then on the mental side of it, I look back on some of the things last year that happened within the Unified Point Series that I did not like and was not proud of. And I got emotionally caught up in a lot of that, and it was exhausting, and we think of fatigue. We think about, okay, if I run to the Derby from here, I'm probably going to be tired. But if I worry the whole way, I'm probably going to be tired
anyway.
So I think on the mental and physical, I'm feeling solid about being in a better place this year, and continuing to grow on that, and really being able to continue to do a better job in that department, just to have that energy when needed. I always say, gotta save enough for the end of the feature. You gotta save enough of that car. I think about the same thing for you and what you're doing, standing out there in the rain all day. Like, you gotta save enough for the feature when it really matters, when everybody, that's
you gotta be on your game.
Right.
So I think that's a great segue, and you kind of already touched on it, to the point of, in this podcast so far, basically everything we've talked about is what I would consider timeless. But I think it'll be fun to watch this part of the podcast in a couple of years, because we're going into, this is the start of the second year of the Unified Point Series. And maybe for people listening at home, can you give them just a quick summary of what that is?
Yes. Unified Point Series. So I'm an announcer. Before last year, I had close to 20 shows, so 17 or 18 shows. And I posted the schedule for last year, just like I do every year. It's a copy and paste thing. Until COVID hit, the schedule every year was a copy and paste unless I added. And when I posted that, a friend of mine, shout out to Josh Woodward from Indiana, he made a comment on there that would make one heck of a schedule like that would make one heck of a point series. Because, to the credit of what you brought up, like, I am proud of the shows that we have on the schedule. Some of those shows like Metal Mayhem and Freedom Hall, some of those shows that stood out that made somebody like that comment, boy, that'd make a heck of a point series. So I am a creative dude, and when I say creative, I don't come up with ideas and think about the huge picture. I get a spark in my mind, and all of a sudden I can see how cool that would be. And I don't see much in between of hurdles, challenges. And so I'm laying there in bed, and everything that I've ever got into, it's like I use Michelle, my wife, bless her, as a filter. And she is as straight up a person as I've ever met. And she doesn't care about my feeling. Oh, that's me saying that. I'm sure she does, but she don't pull punches.
She tells you what you need to hear.
She don't pull punches, not one. And but she is the most supportive person that I've ever met in my life. So I married her. So I'm laying there in bed, and I'm telling her, like, this is my sales pitch. This guy commented this, and man, that's not a bad idea. And how about what if I got like just a few promoters, because some of these guys I work for, they probably buy into probably anything that I ever told them. So what if I got a few of them to each give me a few shows, and let's say they gave me like $100, and if I did like 12, that'd be like $1,200. And everybody likes these live videos that I do. So, man, I could kind of like keep track of it, and I'm telling her, like, I'm thinking this. It's not like it was planned out. Like I'm building it in my mind as I'm selling it to her.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm going to be at the show anyway. Like, it's no extra work for me. And I could do this and I could do that. And at the end of the year, I could do a live video and I could PayPal this money out. And she's like, Mark, why? You already do more than you need to do. Like, you already put your time in for that job. We talked about the expectations of a Derby announcer. She's like, you're already going above and beyond. So why just add more stress to yourself? I'm, oh, no. I wouldn't be stressed. Just make my job funner. Like, and it wouldn't be any more work. Like,
do you ever feel like just going back and slapping yourself a little bit?
I said, it wouldn't be any more work. It's like, I sold it, and she didn't go, wow, that sounds fantastic. She's kind of like, here we go. You know, it's almost like she can, like, I can't see all that stuff, but she can see the first hurdle, right? And she didn't say, absolutely not. We don't have a relationship like that. We, even if it was something that she wanted to do that I didn't, like, we still try to support each other. So she didn't throw up too big of a red flag. And I'm like, again, creative, wild. I was already off to the stars. And so I'm like, okay, so how am I going to do this? So I sent a group text to those 17 promoters. And she always says I'm good with my words. So, like, type up this. When I say type something up, we're talking that could have took 6 hours because I read it, cut.
Yeah. And
now this is it. Boom, hit send. And immediately they started saying, yeah, that sounds cool. We're in. And I'm like, oh, so there's more than a few.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay. So, like, all right, well, sounds like better than half of you are in, or 3/4 of you. So the next thing would be, like, what would be your entry fee to be a part of this? And that's how I would pay the purse. And one guy spit out like $100, and I'm like, perfect. That's great. I'm thinking, man, that's a few $1,000. Like, oh, that's even better. It's happening. And another guy was like, screw that, man. You're going to give us so much advertising. Like, you can't do this for any less than $250 an entry. And I'm like, oh man, that's like more than double what the first guy said. And the first guy was like, yeah, I'll do that. And then other people are like, yeah, I'll do that. I'm like, and it just went. Within 24 hours, every promoter on that schedule was in for $250 for their show. So it's like, okay, there's $7,500.
Oh, you already scaled 7X where you thought this was going.
Okay, in 24 hours. So I'm like, okay. So I've never really looked back on it like you're asking me to do. So this is raw. But then it's like, okay, well, who are my friends that are vendors? One of the hardest things for me in life is to ask anybody for anything. And I'm sure there's more in depth to that of why that is for me. Maybe it's a weakness. I don't know. But man, I've grown up working for everything that I have. And so for me, just to ask, hey, can I have this, or will you do this for me? It's almost impossible. So it was more like, you guys are all my friends. This is happening. I want to give you the opportunity to be a part of it. And immediately people started trying to throw parts at me. And I was like, look, I've got a lot on my plate. And this is already like, I already seen that it was like, oh, this could get way bigger than I expected. So I'm like, right now I'm by myself. I don't want to have anything more to manage right now than some money.
Yep.
And people started asking, well, what's your different levels? Like, I don't know. What do you mean by that? Like, right. Like I didn't think of that stuff. And so quickly on the fly, created some levels, and people started taking advantage of them. And then the next thing you know, fast forward through the year, COVID hit. So I think we had 2 shows. We had Redneck Rumble and we'd had Florida Southern Nationals. Yep. And boom, COVID. So now something that within a month's time that just erupted. I mean, just blew apart. A couple months, I think like 3 months went by with COVID, And I think we had like 7 or 8 shows cancel. And, you know, I had a lot of people just telling me about, like, back to that conversation about the cars, just, you know, probably should just cancel.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's going to think any less of you. You send them, you know, for me, it was like, well, then what do I do with the money? So if I take it to next year, then I got to pay taxes. You know, like, my mind is simple. Like, I'm thinking about risk and reward. And I told myself, and Michelle, and she supported me, if June happens, if Metal Mayhem happens, at that time Hardcore had picked up the knob, and I was pretty sure that was going to happen. But for that show to happen wasn't going to tell me that the rest of the season was going to fly, right? So I figured if Metal Mayhem happens right there in Indiana, then we'll press play. And if we have 8 shows, we'll pay out $20,000 for 8 shows. But I'm thinking in my mind, I've never seen a point series that has 10 shows in it, you know, let alone what we had at that time, close to 30. And now scaled back after COVID back. I think we finished with 23. So just fast forward all the way through, just an amazing season of, like, I couldn't have written a better script for the competition. And I talk about watching these people and how driven they were and how they dealt with the pressure. And I said it at the expo last weekend, and I'll say it 100 times over. Like, I've personally never in my life, I don't know that I've ever seen that kind of pressure. You know, there's a lot of pressure if you're going to a show and you may not have the gas money to get home on the way. That's pressure, right? But that's one night. This was night after night, and to see what those guys did, like, we gave away almost $28,000 last year. We gave away every dollar of it, and it felt like a lot, but when I wrote those checks, I felt like I wish I could give them more. Like,
you know, they earned every bit of that.
Hopefully they feel like 5,000 is enough for a second. And Michelle's like, Mark, listen to yourself. Like, back to reality. Like, this is what you're giving them. They collectively, the top 10 collectively, won over $100,000 last year and have memories that they couldn't buy. Like, so it is not on you to worry about if they feel like it was worth their time. But that's the pressure. I put so much pressure on myself for everybody to feel like they've got their worth out of, I guess you could call, our product.
Yeah, and I think this year is really the chance to see how much that pressure can transpire into new things, right? Like, who's going, now that everybody watched that story unfold last year, I'm really curious to see what kind of stories are going to come out this year. Is it going to be the same? Is it going to be repeat? Or is it going to be a whole new set of stories? And I'm really leaning towards that last one. I think we're going to see some new people raise up.
Yeah, your guess is as good as mine. With the way it ended last year, and, you know, there was speculation that because the last show got canceled, people got robbed. I disagree as sure as where I'm sitting, and I've said that last year, and, like, I don't want to continue to pound that home, but, like, we had it. It's not something that we've ever had to process, that they had 23 shows and they scored. You know, when I say they, let's say the top 2 people, they scored at just over half of them. So, you know, there were other opportunities there. It just so happened that they really needed that last opportunity. And so it's kind of hard to accept. Like, it's like a cord, that cord getting ripped out of that camera right now. It's just like, we're like, you know, the music stops. So I believe that county fairs not happening last year played a factor. I don't know how big, but the beauty of the thing that I was excited about last year before COVID hit was that there's some tough Derby drivers out there that we'll never see today, or because they're local and that's their thing. And you know, I think we're about 55-45. So 55, what you would consider a national type. So let's not use perception of national show. Let's just say there's fairs and then there's standalone shows, right? Today's a standalone show. It's not a fair.
Yep.
Whether somebody would consider this national level, like we're going to try to make it that way, right?
Yep.
But we've got a little bit more of the standalone national type shows than we do the county fairs. But there's guys that flat clean up at county fairs, and I think that's going to be a factor this year. I think we're going to see, because it's not easy for me or you to go 2 states away and score points at somebody's county fair. But we witnessed that last year a couple times. I mean, we witnessed a couple guys go in somebody's turf that I thought I would have bet $100 bill they were going to get junked, and they didn't. And then they won. Like, it was just like, to see what some of those guys did that were inside the top 10, if we're blessed enough to see half of that or anything like that this year, it'll be amazing. Because, if one person just ran out with it, like, then our focus would be on the second and third, or we'd put our focus somewhere else. But to have a chase like we did, we couldn't have paid money for something like that.
Yeah, and I can't stress enough for the people watching and listening is the fact that those guys only ran about half the shows on that schedule.
Yeah.
Think of how things could have changed and been different if somebody decided to go to every show.
Yeah, and there were
not to discredit what they did.
100%.
Absolutely, that's not, statement is 100% not to do that. It's pointing out to the fact that it still could have been anybody's game.
It could have, and so I've personally seen people get on a hot streak, and win a few derbies a year or whatever. But it's almost like they got on something I've never seen in our sport, where it was almost like they had no choice but to score points, and they were ready to do that at all cost. And when they didn't, I could have crawled under a rock, because like, I felt so genuinely bad for them, because I knew the time that they were putting in, and I knew what that meant. And, for them, I can't imagine how that felt. You've put all that work in all week, and you made this trip, and, and you're coming home without 6 points or 10 points. And they really, the top 2 spots won darn near $50,000. And like, all they cared about was 6 points. That's what separated them.
Yep.
Right.
The prize money was just gravy to help them get to the next one.
Yeah.
Wow. So Mark, for those watching and listening at home, where can somebody go and find out some more information about your point series, and what the rules are, how they get involved in that sort of thing?
So the quickest access is the website, www.527unifiedseries.com, I think, and shame on me if that's not right, but you can go to our Facebook page. I do have an ME527 announcing Facebook page, and the website is tagged right there. And that's another thing that shout out to Shannon Davis. She built that thing and she manages it. When I leave here, I'm going to send her results, and she's going to update the website. We try to keep that updated with every show. And and she, she's still experimenting. Obviously, everybody wants a cool website. For me, being a simple guy, my drive is that it's easily accessible, that it highlights the things that it needs to highlight. The sponsor recognition, the regulations, to your point, which there's not a lot. Try to keep it simple, and then it's pretty cool the way she's got the sponsor set up. It's almost like in a reel. So when you click on the sponsor tab, from top to bottom, you can see all the sponsors. And when you click on their image, she puts a hyperlink or something that'll take you right to All for Him Racing. So if you have a website, she's probably going to do that to the website. But if somebody doesn't have a website, she's just going to do it to their Facebook page. And that way, if anybody wants to, check out what All for Him Racing's got, or any of our sponsors, that they're able to access that through our page. Same goes with apparel. I've, keep a little bit of apparel, but as far as that, a lot of it's through Derby Tees. And so if somebody clicks on something on there, like a hat, it's going to take them right to the Derby Tees page where they can order that. So things like the thing I care about, like, is the leaderboard, right? Because I want to see every week who's in the lead. There's a couple things with that. One, giving that person recognition for being the leader that week or that month or however long they keep the lead. But I feel like it adds some pressure too, right? And last year we would pull those people, try to get them on a crash course, just to hear from them, again, keep the pressure on them because, we want our champion to be able to withstand pressure that nobody else could, whether that be pressure from seeing their name in the limelight. Floyd Mayweather, the boxer, he always talked about, some people just aren't ready for the lights. They're good boxers, they're great fighters, and they just flat knock people out. But as soon as they get on that big stage and they see, he referenced Denzel Washington sitting in the front row or whoever, it's almost like their skill set disappears a little bit. And not that it doesn't exist, but I look at the leaderboard and the leaderboard and the website, or bringing people on crash course, and now, hopefully the Jura resource as well one day, is just keeping that pressure on them, making sure that they're okay. You can win derbies. You can win enough to have enough points to be the champion, but we want you to experience the full roller coaster of the pressure, the highs, the lows, and overcome any amount of adversity, because when somebody's name gets in the light, what happens? It's like a magnet for somebody else that's jealous or envious, or some of those things that are real, but none of us are ever proud to kind of fall into those traps, and it happens to all of us. That's when they're going to try to get a hold of them on the track. Like, we're going to see how bad this dude is. And I don't know that that's what happened last year, but I'll never forget watching Mike Klinger and Don Santel go at it. Klinger gets the rap for being like one of Pennsylvania's best. Like, he's a derby driving son of a gun. And like, not only to see them go at it in Dunbar, PA, but to see, it was the difference in 2 points for Don. Klinger could have cared less about the points, but when we saw Don Santel's front bumper rolling down, like, okay, well, Klinger's got him. This is going to waste him. Bumper's going to roll down, get into the front tires. It's going to be over. But it wasn't. Like, that's that perseverance. It's that never give up. It's what I talked about in the beginning of, like, okay, now I've got a little bit of a handicap. Now I've got to get it done another way because my front tires aren't rolling. I can't steer. And the next thing you know, Klinger's front bumper's rolled down. They're both rolled down. They're both locked up. And a Cadillac is longer, A-arms forward, than the Buick or Olds that Santel was in. And
he was dragging in the ground.
Santel's was in his tires and Klinger's was in the mud. That's a wrap. 2 more points.
Can't write a better story.
I was just like, man, my poor shirt, my arm here is going to tear it up. So,
how many shows do you have on the list this year?
38.
38.
Yeah.
Are you ready for that?
Mm-mm. No, I have a deep, genuine fear that I am going to have to overcome, and just, it's not a fear of, can I get to 38? I've talked a lot about not wanting to disappoint people. First and foremost, my family, my wife, my kids. Anytime there's something going on at the house that I'm not a part of, like, I have a deep, genuine, like, I wish I was a part of that memory. And so last year, I think that I got off the hook a little bit with having some of those feelings because nothing was happening because of COVID. There weren't weddings, there weren't, you know what I mean? But this year everything's full on, and sure enough, right out of the gate, the Smith Metalworks Expo, our cousin got married, and so the whole family was there, and it's like,
And you're looking at the pictures on Facebook.
Okay, this is how it's going to start. Like this is not going to be an easy road, but I believe it is definitely my passion. I believe that this wasn't my plan. I believe that for whatever reason, I'm here for that reason, and I'm going to make the best of it. Perfect example. I'm probably going to cut out after the show tonight and just drive back as far as I can safely.
Yep.
So to be that much closer in the morning when I wake up and hopefully get some family time in tomorrow before work on Monday. So,
yep.
Yes.
And that's the unwritten story behind a lot of Derby drivers, and especially, those of us who go to a lot more events than a typical driver does, is the self-sacrifice that happens in the background. It's like my wife sitting over here, and while we're filming this, and she's self-sacrificing just right at the moment. We're actually together for one of the rare occasions while we're at a Derby
be a part
weekend.
Of your second honeymoon.
So I totally get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And, family and some of that stuff has to be put off to the side because these events, I look at it and I try not to be caught up in it too much, but with like the video stuff, I'm capturing people's memories.
Yeah.
This might be the only time.
Cool. That's a good way to look at it.
It's one of those times when I got to share the track with my dad and my brother. That's only ever happened once, but we got video of it. How many other stories go unwritten that happened where I'm capturing those memories, right?
Yeah.
And I can't even remember where I was going with all this, but
no, I'm there. You gave me a nugget because I'll pick up where you left off, man. That's the nugget that I always try to get a nugget from everything that I agree. Like when I say lean into it, like if you're open-minded, you're going to get something from it. And what you just said, like, I don't think about that much. I don't think about the experience that I helped give that fan or that family, or people talk about, man, we just play these videos and man, when you say our name on there, like it's just like it means so much to us, and it's so easy to take that stuff for granted. But life's about making sacrifices, and in this case, in your case, if you didn't get to the cousin's wedding, but like 10,000 people are happier tomorrow because of the effort that you put in. Kudos to you for that. That's a great point. And photography, filming, the announcing, or the drivers on the track, they have that same opportunity to give somebody like, holy crap, like what did we just witness? That was amazing. So, and when we find that lane, find our passion, maybe we missed that wedding, but I believe that I'm as good as a person I've ever been in my life, and for my family and for my job and for the sport. I feel on fire with life and everything that I'm involved in right now. So like, okay, so what if I wasn't on fire and I was at that wedding? Like, ooh, so like, yeah, that's a great point. And a great analogy. Good way to look at that.
It's hard. It's not easy.
No, but nothing worth, it's cliche, but the old saying of nothing worth having is easy or come easy. If it is easy, probably not growing, probably not stretching our comfort zone, and we could probably be doing more, because that was the story of my childhood of any teacher that you talk to. Like, boy, Mark has a lot of potential if he would apply himself, and it wasn't till later in life that I learned that. So,
Mark, is there anything else you wanted to touch on while I got you on here? Things you make note of?
No, man. For me personally, I'll just end with the same thing that I started with, and I'm super happy for you. Like, I'm impressed. Like,
well, thank you.
This looks legit. Like, I'm a Rogan. I'm a podcast fan. So this feels legit. That case over there, like, I'm a nerd where if I'm carrying my tools into work, like, I'm proud of the tools, whether a laptop or whatever it is. Like, I'm here to do a job. I'm here to do a good job. So no doubt in my mind, by looking at all this equipment, that you have done a little bit of research. You've did some homework.
This has been over a year in the making of planning.
Nice.
Just some simple thoughts to my wife and being like, well, what's a podcast? Why would anybody want to listen to you for that long a period of time? That's why I get Mark on here.
She didn't throw a big enough red flag, so here we are.
Here we are. And the goal is to try to keep these things as timeless as I can. I mean, because I feel there's a lot of drivers out there that don't get to tell their story.
Yeah.
And they deserve the chance. All those people that were chasing points would love to have them on here.
Oh, sweet.
That kind of thing. Or what new stories are going to happen this year.
Yeah.
So I'm going to close with one last question. Okay. And I think this is a fun one to ask because it means something different to everybody. But what does Derby mean to you?
What does Derby mean to me? In my career, in a manufacturing career, there are a lot of challenges, a lot of hurdles, and a lot of things to overcome that a lot of people that I've met in my life aren't equipped with being able to fully overcome. The sport of demolition derby to me, although the competition, the crashing the cars together, the people, the all the things, you could write a book about all the positive things in it, and then there's some not positive things, but anybody in demolition derby, whether they're All For Him Racing or ME527 announcing, or somebody that just figured out that their transmission's bad when they got to the track over here at the track where we're going, and they get to that point where they have a choice of what story they're going to tell. Are they going to tell the story that got to the track, terrible luck, transmission went out, and everybody's probably going to say, man, that sucks. You worked really hard, maybe next time. Or do they want to tell the story that they took the transmission out, they changed it, they went and ran, and they had some success. They had fun. Maybe they even won. Mm-hmm. So for me, demolition derby is all about the story. And aside from the story, that there's so many opportunities to tell good stories, whether through what you do, what I do, or somebody writing a story on the track. Anybody that's in any of those positions or any lanes that is able to overcome things like that, when you put them in what I call the real world, the Monday, the day-to-day, the 9 to 5, I feel like this sport gives us an advantage over everyone around us, because it gives us so many different looks at so many different things in life that it feels like people turn to you because they know when crap goes south or the getting gets tough. Like, a derby person is going to stay up 3 nights straight if that's what it means to put that car on the track, or if that what it means to get this podcast published on the date that you want it published, or if that's what it means to get the rings in time and the trophies in time to give away all the prizes before the next one starts. Mm-hmm. That's what derby is to me. It's a group of people that are exceptionally gifted, telling some amazing stories.
Love it, Mark.
Yep.
Thank you for taking the time to sit down with us, and for all the folks either watching at home or listening right now. We got to see your heart a little bit, and it's been awesome.
Cool. Thank you, Alex. And let's go kick some butt at this show.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in here to Derby Chat. This is Alex with All For Him Racing. And if you guys are not familiar with us, check us out on YouTube, all the number 4 Him Racing videos. And we post videos from all over the country. And you'll get to hear Mark's voice all over the place as we try to chase him as well as we can to capture those memories for all the drivers. So thank you for listening. And until the next one, talk to you later, guys.